The morning light slid across the dew-kissed grass of Hillview Park, soft and golden, like the kind that whispers of peace, until it doesn't. A solitary man sat motionless on the far bench beneath a dying oak, his broad shoulders hunched slightly, his calloused hands resting between his knees. The camouflage jacket he wore had seen years of dirt and sand, sweat and storms. It had stories sewn into its very seams, stories no one asked to hear. His name was Ryan Walker, but no one in this quiet Virginia suburb knew that. To most, he was just the silent man who showed up early some mornings, tossed peanuts to squirrels, and sat staring at something no one else could see. He didn't smile much, didn't talk unless spoken to, and didn't bother explaining why he always left before noon, as if sunlight became too heavy to carry. But today, he didn't come for the squirrels. Today, he came for Marcus. 10 years ago, to the very day, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Dean bled out in the dirt of a foreign land, whispering Ryan's name as mortars screamed overhead. And every June 4th since, Ryan showed up. Same bench, same time, same silence, to remember a man who died so others could live. The old photo in Ryan's hand was wrinkled at the corners. The image faded, but Marcus's smile still beamed out like it hadn't aged a day. A boy ran past, giggling, chasing a bright red rubber ball that bounced once, then twice, then rolled right into the street. Ryan's eyes snapped to the road, instincts flaring. A black sedan came flying around the bend, too fast, driver glancing at a phone, not seeing what was about to happen. Without a word, without a thought, Ryan dropped the photo, lunged off the bench, and sprinted toward the street like his soul was on fire. The boy froze, eyes wide, legs trembling. Ryan tackled him mid-step, wrapping the child in his arms and rolling them both onto the grass just as the car slammed its brakes and skidded to a smoking halt inches away. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Then chaos exploded. The boy's mother screamed. Bystanders gasped. Someone shouted, "Call the cops!" Ryan sat up slowly, brushing grass from the boy's shirt, checking his limbs, his breathing, his pulse, every instinct still in combat mode. The mother reached them, yanked her son into her arms, tears streaking her face as she whispered, "Oh my God, you saved him." But by then, the sirens were already echoing off the trees, fast and sharp. 2 officers stormed onto the scene, tense and reactive, eyes darting, hands hovering near their weapons. One scanned the situation, saw the camouflage, the beard, the hardened stare, and made a snap judgment. "Step away from the child," he barked, weapon half drawn. Ryan held his hands up slowly, warily, but didn't speak. "I said step back," the officer roared, charging forward. "I'm not resisting," Ryan said calmly. "I was just—" The words vanished as he was shoved face down onto the grass. A knee pressed into his back. His arms were yanked behind him. The cold bite of handcuffs snapped around his wrists, and suddenly the park fell into horrified silence. "The—" boy cried out, trying to explain, but his voice was drowned in static from the officer's radio. The mother begged them to stop, pleaded that they had it wrong, but the cops had locked into their version of the truth, and they weren't letting go. To them, he looked unstable, unknown, possibly dangerous. Ryan said nothing. He didn't fight, didn't scream. He just stared at the blades of grass beneath him, where Marcus's photo had landed, fluttering in the breeze. People gathered. Phones were raised. Murmurs turned into arguments. But the cops dragged Ryan to the cruiser, shoved him inside, and slammed the door without another word. At the precinct, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, like a swarm of angry hornets. Ryan sat alone in the small gray interrogation room, wrists bruised, jacket dirtied, photo of Marcus now folded in his pocket like a wound he couldn't close. He didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't ask for a call, didn't ask for anything. He had lived through ambushes, bloodbaths, and the screaming silence that follows death. This was just another kind of battlefield. But what the officers didn't know, and couldn't have imagined, was who exactly they had handcuffed. One of them, curious now, pulled up Ryan's ID. He paused, brows furrowed. "Chief Petty Officer Ryan Walker, retired," he read aloud. He tapped a few keys. His face changed. The other officer leaned over his shoulder. A beat passed, then another. The silence in the room shifted from control to confusion to dread. Ryan Walker wasn't a drifter. He wasn't a threat. He was a decorated Navy sniper, one of the most lethal and respected operators of his generation, the kind of man who had medals not for show, but for saving lives. The younger cop stepped back, whispered, "We need to call someone." "Who?" the older one asked. But before the question could be answered, a phone rang down the hall, and someone answered. 15 minutes later, every officer in the building stood a little straighter, because a black SUV had pulled into the precinct parking lot, and from it stepped a man whose name carried weight in every military circle from Washington to war zones, General Raymond Carver. 4 stars shined on his shoulders, steel in his spine, a shadow behind his eyes that only men who've survived hell could understand. He didn't speak as he walked through the station, eyes forward, footsteps sure. He didn't ask where Ryan was. He already knew. When the interrogation door opened, Ryan looked up, confused, but only for a second. Then recognition dawned. "General Carver," he said, standing stiffly. The general didn't speak for a moment. He just looked at the man before him, the man who had once covered his extraction from a hellish ambush in Kandahar, holding position alone for 3 days without food or sleep so others could live. His voice broke the silence like thunder. "Chief Walker, I came here to apologize." Ryan blinked, stunned. "Sir, I heard what happened, and I came here personally, to make it right." From behind them, the officers watched in stunned silence, unsure whether to speak or disappear entirely. The general turned slowly to face them. "Do you have any idea who this man is?" he said, not loud, but deadly clear. The officers stood frozen. "This man is the reason I'm still alive," Carver said. "He's the reason 7 of my men made it home to their families. He is a hero." The word hung heavy in the air. A decorated sniper. Bronze Star with Valor. Silver Star. 3 tours in Afghanistan. The kind of man you hope to have watching. You're 6. The younger officer's face turned pale. The older one looked like he wanted to melt into the wall. Carver stepped forward and unlocked the cuffs himself, his hand lingering on Ryan's shoulder. "I should have found you years ago," he said softly. "But life happened, and then this." Ryan looked down, ashamed not of what happened, but of how easily people could erase a man's truth. "I was just trying to help," he said quietly. Carver nodded. "I know, and now I will." He turned to the officers. "I expect a full statement of apology to be issued, publicly." They nodded rapidly, but the shame had already sunk in too deep. Carver looked back at Ryan. "You didn't deserve this. Not after all you've given." Ryan didn't cry. He hadn't in years, but something in him cracked. A dam that had been holding back more than water, because after everything he'd been through, after everything he'd lost, today, someone had seen him. Not as a ghost, not as a mistake, but as a man who mattered, as a man who never stopped serving, even when the war was over, and deep in that room, where broken things often go forgotten, a voice, finally, was heard, and it was only the beginning. The sun had already dipped low by the time Ryan stepped out of the precinct, his wrists free but red, the sky painted in streaks of orange and sorrow. General Carver walked beside him in silence, neither man speaking because some wounds need more than words to close. Ryan looked around, unsure where to go. He hadn't come here with a plan. He rarely did. For a moment it seemed the world had returned to ignoring him, as if those hours in the station had never happened. But then a voice rang out from across the lot. "Sir, excuse me, sir." It was the boy's mother. She rushed forward, the little boy clinging to her hand, his eyes wide with recognition. "You saved my son," she said, tears swelling. "I should have never let them take you without explaining. I froze. I didn't fight for you." Ryan shook his head gently. "You were scared. You protected your child. That's all that matters." The boy looked up at him, small hands fidgeting with his sleeve. "You're a hero," he said softly. Ryan knelt, eye level with him. "No, kid," he whispered, voice rough. "I'm just a man who didn't walk away." Carver placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder again, but this time the gesture felt different, like one soldier anchoring another to solid ground. And then, without fanfare or press, Carver drove Ryan back to a base he hadn't stepped foot on in over a decade. The gates opened without a word. The guards saluted instinctively, recognizing a uniform that still lived in the marrow of the man, even if the patches were long retired. Inside, men and women stopped what they were doing as the black SUV passed. Ryan looked out the window, haunted. It felt like a dream he didn't belong in. But Carver parked near the memorial wall where 1,000 names were etched in steel and stone. "Come with me," he said. Ryan hesitated, then followed. The wall was longer than he remembered, the names newer. But when they reached the middle, Carver stopped at a plaque that bore the name Chief Petty Officer Marcus Dean. Ryan's knees nearly gave out. "You put him here?" he whispered. Carver nodded. "He earned it." Ryan reached out, fingers trembling as he traced the letters, the same way he once held Marcus's hand while the life drained out of it in the dust. "I've never been able to forget," Ryan murmured. "You're not supposed to," Carver replied. "But you don't have to carry it alone anymore." Ryan's breathing slowed, deepened, as if for the first time in years, someone had lifted the rucksack of grief off his back, just enough to let him stand straight. As night fell, Carver drove him to the VA facility on the other side of town, a place Ryan had always avoided, afraid of what he might feel inside those walls. But today, he walked in, and the receptionist stood as he approached. "Welcome home, Chief Walker," she said, her voice warm. "We've heard of you." Ryan blinked, surprised. "You have?" she smiled. "There's a wall here, too." And later that night, as he was shown to a room, not a cell, not a cot, but a real room, he noticed a photo on the nightstand. It was him, younger, in uniform, standing beside Marcus, both smiling like they didn't know what the world would want. Day take from them. "Where did this come from?" he asked. Carver stepped in behind him, voice low. "I keep things. I never forget." Ryan sat down slowly, eyes scanning the room, the silence soft this time. Not heavy, but healing. He'd spent so many years drifting, thinking the world had forgotten the men who gave everything and came back with pieces missing. But maybe not all of it had. The next morning, the precinct issued a public apology. It was printed in the paper, read on local news, and posted on the department's website. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered came a week later when Ryan was invited to speak at a ceremony for fallen soldiers, a podium he had never imagined standing behind. Carver stood beside him. The crowd below was silent. Veterans, families, children of the fallen. Ryan stepped to the mic, his voice unsteady, then steadier. "I wasn't handcuffed because I did something wrong," he said. "I was handcuffed because people forgot to ask who I was." He paused, scanning the faces. Not every scar is on the skin, and not every uniform is visible. He told them about Marcus, about that dusty road in Afghanistan, about the nights that followed, And he told them what he'd never told anyone before, that sometimes the hardest part of war is surviving it. The room was still. No breath, no whisper, just listening. He finished with a story about that little boy and the red ball, and how it brought back something he thought he'd lost forever. Purpose. That day, 10 people stood and saluted when he stepped down from the podium. Then 20. Then the whole room. And Ryan Walker, the man once forgotten, stood a little taller, because a hand that saves is never truly empty, and a heart that still feels is still alive. From that moment on, Ryan became something more than a memory to those who once overlooked him. He became a symbol, a reminder, that the cost of service doesn't end with the final battle, that not all heroes ask to be seen, but they all deserve to be. And years later, when that same little boy stood in uniform, shaking Ryan's hand at graduation, he whispered the same words back to him. "You didn't walk away, so I never will." Ryan smiled, tears glistening at the corners of his eyes. For the first time, he felt whole, and in the echoes of his journey, through war, through silence, through injustice, there lived a simple, powerful truth, that sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to forget.